Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. In this session, inshallah, I will explain to you the relationship between the last 10 ayat of the last 10 surahs of the Quran. Just the order of the last 10 surahs of the Quran, we'll go through it quickly. Just so you appreciate just that conclusion to that discussion, that the surahs of the Quran are in remarkable order. Okay. So we'll begin with Surah Al-Fil. Anybody know the beginning of Surah Al-Fil? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. What is the surah about? It is about the Kaaba, the city of Makkah being attacked by an army of elephants and it being protected. Allah Azza wa Jal protected that city under any circumstance. Even if it was facing an impossible enemy, impossible to fight against, an army of elephants, Allah still protected that city. The very next surah is Surah Quraysh. How does it begin? لِإِلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ. Allah Azza wa Jal talks about how He took care of the economic prosperity of the city of Makkah. رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. They could travel in the winter and in the summer freely. Now, I want to take you back to a dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam, remember he made the dua, make this a peaceful city? You remember that? Okay, I told you he said make this a peaceful city and provide its children from all kinds of fruit. And yesterday I told you that the peaceful city part is about its protection and law and order and security, and then the fruit part is about what? Economic prosperity. Actually, Surah Al-Fil and Surah Quraysh together are the fulfillment of the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. In Surah Al-Fil, even if an army of elephants attacks, the city is still safe. Allah will protect that city, fulfilling the dua of Ibrahim when he said, Ya Allah, make this city safe. Then he said, provide them all kinds of fruit. And Allah says in the next surah that the Quraysh get to go and travel in the summer and in the winter. Now this is important, people, because the Quraysh were the center of Arabian society, and the Arabs were really, really big on robbing each other to death, except they left the Quraysh alone. The Quraysh they could travel whenever they want. So actually what the other people used to do is they only used to travel during the very difficult hot seasons or very intense cold seasons. They could only travel in those seasons. Why? Because then they know that the robbers, it's too hard for them to wait for us in the desert. So we can only travel during the tough times. So we'll go towards the hot climate in the summer and we'll go towards the cold climate in the winter. Even though for convenience, what should you do? You go towards the cold climate in the summer and you go towards the hot climate in the winter. But everybody else couldn't do that. But the Quraysh could go wherever they want. Free ride. No problem. Nobody will rob them. Why not? Because every other tribe used to have idols. And where are the idols stored? In Makkah. If you mess with them, they'll say, you took our money now. Watch what happens when I go back to Makkah. I'm going to take that idol of yours and... You see that giant monkey? You watch whose tail is missing when you get there. Oh, you understand? So they were afraid of messing with Makkah because the Makkans would then destroy their idols. So they left them alone. Also, after the entire story of the army of elephants being destroyed, the mushrikun used to believe that the people of Quraysh are untouchable. They are crazy powerful. You don't mess with them because even elephants can't mess with them. So we'll leave them alone. So Allah says, رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. What's incredible though is, Allah says, I made those conveniences for you. You can travel wherever you want, whenever you want, unlike anybody else. By the way, when they do travel out of season, what do they bring back? All kinds of fruits. They bring back out of season fruits. Nobody else has those fruits, they do. What was the dua of Ibrahim? Provide these people all kinds of fruit. وَارْزُقْ أَهْلَهُ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ. Provide them all kinds of fruits. Then Allah told the Quraysh, I'm providing you everything that Ibrahim asked for. You should at least be true to the legacy of your father. He built that house not so you could do shirk, not so you could worship false gods. He built that house so you can worship Him. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. The reason that house is mentioned, or this house, the Kaaba, is mentioned in that surah is because the house was built by who? Ibrahim, and their prosperity is directly a result of the prayer of Ibrahim. So everything's actually going back to Ibrahim alayhi salam. Do you guys understand the relationship between Surah Al-Fil and Surah Quraysh? one after the other. Now that those two surahs have been mentioned together, Allah Azza wa Jal then mentions in the next surah, Al-Ma'un. You people are supposed to fulfill the legacy of Ibrahim. And instead of fulfilling the legacy of Ibrahim, by the way, what is the legacy of Ibrahim? You worship Allah sincerely. You worship Allah sincerely, right? And as a result of worshipping Allah sincerely, you serve people. You do good to people. Ibrahim alayhi salam is very generous. Even when strangers come to his house, what does he do? He takes the best meat that he has. There's a baby cow in the back. No more. And he gets slaughtered and he feeds them. You know, he's a giving person. He's a generous, he cares about other people. Angels come and say, we're going to destroy the nation of Lut. What does he say? Hey, wait, don't do that. Take care of those people. He's making dua for humanity. He's making dua for other people. He's caring about them. So he's got two qualities, Ibrahim alayhi salam. He's really close to Allah. He worships Allah sincerely and he cares about people. He really cares about people, right? The irony is, you people are supposed to be living up to the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam, yet let's see how you measure up. Let's see what you, meaning the Quraysh, look like. Well, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Have you seen the one who lies against the deen altogether? He doesn't encourage the feeding of the poor. He pushes the orphan around. You know, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Then the worst kind of destruction should fall upon people who pray and pray only to show off. And when they pray, they're lazy and lackadaisical. They don't even care what they're praying, how they're praying. They're standing in salat like, you know, okay, what kind of people are these? وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَعُونَ. And they're so cheap and they're so miserly, they won't even give people ma'un. Do you know what ma'un is? Ma'un is little things. Somebody knocks on your door, you live in an apartment, somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, do you have salt? We don't know what that is. It's ma'un. It's not going to kill you to give them a spoon of salt. Take my salt. So Allah is saying then in this surah, the criticism is you people don't pray sincerely and you're so cheap. Isn't that the exact opposite of what Ibrahim alayhi salam represents? So first Allah says, I gave you what Ibrahim asked for. And you're not true to your father's legacy in Surah Al-Ma'un. Then let's see what happens next. Well, if you're not true to the legacy that Ibrahim alayhi salam you were supposed to fulfill that legacy, maybe there's someone else who does. The next surah is Inna A'tainaka Al-Kawthar. Rasulullah. There, it's proven that the Quraysh are unqualified, unworthy of living up to the name of Ibrahim. Surah Al-Kawthar is proof that Rasulullah is worthy of the legacy of Ibrahim. We've given you Kawthar, what should you do? What were the two things Rasulullah was told to do in Surah Al-Kawthar? فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Pray and sacrifice. Oh, pray and sacrifice. Wait a second. Whose legacy is that? Ibrahim alayhi salam. You fulfill the legacy. And then he says, Inna shani'aka huwal abtar. Your enemy will be discontinued. Oh my God, Allah already started calling who an enemy? Somebody's his enemy. Somebody's the Prophet's enemy. And I know tafsir will tell us who the enemy is, but in the text itself it's a little ambiguous. Your enemy will be discontinued. So who is that enemy? Well, Allah just now mentioned that those people are unqualified. But the Prophet is qualified. So they say, wait. Even if the Prophet is qualified, he's still Quraysh. He's still one of us. We're all the same. We're all the same family. Actually, you're no longer the same family. Don't tell them, قُلْ يَا قَوْمِي قُلْ يَا قَبِيلَتِي قُلْ يَا قُرَيْشِ. What is the next surah? قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. I'm going to say that I have nothing to do with you people anymore. Yes, we were both the same blood. We're Banu Hashim. We're from the Quraysh. We have lived here. My ancestry is here. But because of this La ilaha illallah, and because you have abandoned the legacy of our father Ibrahim, and I'm trying to hold on to the legacy of our father Ibrahim, we are now two separate ways. You are kafirun. You are not my people anymore. I will not call you my people. I will call you al-kafirun. And I don't worship what you worship, and you don't worship what I worship, and you go your way, I go my way. Lakum dinukum waliyadin. When you say that, by the way, in the tribal world, in tribal society, when you tell your tribe, I have nothing to do with you, you go your way, I go my way. You know what that's considered? It's considered treason. And once you declare that I have nothing to do with my tribe, that tribe becomes your enemy. In other words, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ is a declaration of war. We have to understand, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ is a declaration of war. Now, if there is a declaration of war, that means from here on out there is a conflict, a physical conflict between the Prophet ﷺ and who? And the Quraysh, his own people, who no longer get called his own people anymore. If there is a conflict, then you have to, at the end of the day, in a conflict, somebody will win. Someone will win and someone will lose. So what does Allah do in the next surah? He let us know who's going to win and who's going to lose. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. SubhanAllah. The war has been declared in Al-Kafirun. The victor has been declared in إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. But the promise of victory does not mean that the victory happens right away. I'll give it to you in a visual way. You see the clouds, but it hasn't rained yet. But before you know, even before you know it's going to rain, you can tell that it's going to rain because you're seeing the clouds and you can feel in the wind. You can sense that rain is coming, right? Now the Prophet is declared, he's been told that victory is coming. People are going to enter Islam in lots of numbers. And he was told this very early. And even though he was told this very early, it didn't look like Islam is going to win very early. There were no indications that Islam will win actually, because there were so few Sahaba, and the Quraysh were so powerful, even elephants couldn't take them down. It didn't look like the Muslims are going to see people entering into Islam, afwajan, multitudes upon multitudes upon multitudes. Hard to imagine. When you make a big promise of victory, when you make big promises, then it's important to at least get some signs, some hope. This is an important concept. So before I go to the next surah, I want you to understand the concept. Zakaria alayhi salam is told that he's going to have a son. Pretty big deal. It's a big deal, so he says, Ya Allah, I believe you, but can I have some sign? He says, you won't speak to people for 3 days. He gives him a sign. Similarly, you have in the Quran, in this case, Allah Azza wa Jal told Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you will take over all, the deen of Allah will be victorious. But unlike Zakaria, who went to Allah and asked for a sign, Allah does not wait for the Prophet to ask for a sign. Allah says, listen, I know you don't think victory is easy, let me show you. Okay, you tell me who your worst enemy is. Okay, my worst enemy is Abu Lahab. Okay, let me make an example out of Abu Lahab for you, so you'll know that victory is coming. What's the next surah? Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. It's not the destruction of all the enemies of Islam, but the worst enemy of Islam is made an example out of, and he's destroyed, called out, just so we know, just so the Prophet knows and the believers know that the promise of Allah that victory is coming is going to happen. Because Abu Lahab was one of the most powerful people in Makkah and also one of the worst enemies of Islam, if not the worst enemy of Islam, arguably the worst enemy of Islam. And Allah took care of him. Now, let's look at this sequence again. The first two surahs were about the dua of Ibrahim. The next two surahs was who's qualified to fulfill the legacy and who's not qualified to fulfill the legacy. The next surah is the one who is qualified declares against war against the one who's not qualified. Once the war is declared, the victor is declared in the next surah. Once the victor is declared, here's a small token that victory is on its way. Abu Lahab, I'll take care of him for you. Which means now their path to victory is clear. There are no obstacles left in our path to victory. When you go for a war for a long time, and we know that really well in the United States, when you engage in war for a long time, is it possible you forget where you were fighting in the first place? You forget why you're fighting in the first place. What was this struggle for? This is a real problem, by the way. This is a very real problem. There are people who are struggling to establish Islamic work, build a school, do da'wah work, build their organization. They've been at it for years, but you know what? When you're at it for a long time, you sometimes forget why you were starting to begin with. There are students when they first started studying Islam, they said, I just want to get close to Allah. I just want to pray and I want to understand what Allah is saying in every salah. That's all I want. And they've been studying Islam for 10 years now, but they don't pay attention in salat anymore. What happens? You lose sight of why you started. You forget. When you started, it was very clear. Over time, the intention and the motivation and the original inspiration that got you started becomes rusty. What does Allah do in this sequencing? Allah says, well, I have cleared the path of victory for you. But as the path of victory becomes clear, and you will be able to establish Allah's deen, I need you to remember what this struggle was about to begin with. This struggle was about the legacy of which man? Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam, in one word, is Tawheed. It is the oneness of Allah. He is the father of monotheism. One God. The father of all monotheistic faiths, they call him. If that's the case, then we should be reminded of the constitution of this faith after victory. What is the constitution of this faith? قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. That's what this deen is all about at the end of the day. Just the oneness of God, oneness of Allah. That's all it's about. You know, He has no son, He didn't give birth, and He's not given birth. Now that that's established, Tawheed is established, here's another important question. Did every prophet preach the same message of one God? Sure. Is it true that every prophet, after a generation or two of him being gone, things started going bad again? And after a few generations, that same nation who was worshipping one God ended up falling into the clutches of shirk again? Did it happen over and over again in history? Sure. Now you have gained victory and you have established the oneness of God. Is it possible that over time you will also fall trapped to the attempts, the attacks of shaitan? Is it possible? Is it possible you will lose your tawheed? Is it possible? Sure. And that oneness of iman, the oneness of God, the tawheed of Allah, the iman in Allah, the la ilaha illallah that lives inside the people's hearts, it has to be protected. But to protect it, you have to protect it from the attacks that come from the outside and the attacks that come from the inside. The attacks that come from the outside should be protected against. So Allah sent us the protection from the outside by revealing, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ وَمِنْ شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ وَمِنْ شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. These are attacks from the outside that can ruin your faith. What kind of attacks are left? The attacks on the inside. Well, what's last surah? قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ مِنْ شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. We ask Allah to protect us from the whispers of those of the shayateen, the devils who whisper inside the chests of the people. Beautiful language. Allah says they whisper inside the chests of the people. He does not say they whisper inside the hearts of the people. Beautiful language. What's the difference between saying the devils have access to the chests as opposed to saying the devils have access to the heart? The chest is a place. The heart is a thing. The heart is inside the chest. It is as though they have, imagine there's a castle, but there's a wall outside the castle. So there's a perimeter. The shayateen are given access inside the gate, but they still don't have access to the castle itself. Allah did not give the devils access to our hearts. The only one who can open the door for them is us. That's why He didn't say الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي قُلُوبِ النَّاسِ. He said الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ. Everything is connected to everything else and it goes together to make a comprehensive argument. Everything flows together and makes a comprehensive argument. This is the structure or the organization of surahs in the Quran. There are, for example, there are many examples of this. One surah will talk about, it's awesome. One surah will talk about people burning in hellfire. And they're saying, hey, we're burning, but where are those guys that we thought were losers? We don't see them here. Who are they talking about? The Muslims. We don't see them burning. We used to think they were pathetic. How come they're not here with us? But where are they? In Jannah. The next surah, the conversation is reversed. There are a bunch of people in heaven. There are a bunch of people in paradise. And one of them says, hey, where's my friend? Where'd he go? We used to hang out together. And guess what he finds out? That friend of his that is missing is where? In Jahannam. So Allah paints one picture in one surah, then He paints the opposite picture in the next surah. He does this all over the Quran. Things are tied together and connected together. In other words, the organization of the Quran and the sequencing of the Quran, it does not make itself obvious to you when you're reading it, which is why when you've tried to read the Quran before in translation from one chapter, or see I'm saying chapter because you thought it was a chapter, one chapter to the next, to the next, to the next, you weren't able to see the connection. You're not able to see the connection. It takes work to discover this order. And the more work you put in, the more beautiful it gets. The more remarkable it gets. So on that note, I've tried to talk to you a little bit about the relationship between different parts or different surahs of the Quran. But what I want to talk to you about now is actually what happens inside a surah.